What a day! What a day! What a day! What a day! What a day of justice! What a day of reconstruction! What a day of revival! What a day of renewal! When we all get together! What a day! What a day! What a day!
All right, welcome to Cwic Show. In this episode, we're going to cover the BYU Devotional that was held last week. The guest speaker was the Reverend Dr. William Barber II. I had a lot of people comment on this and write in asking if we would do an episode on this. I had planned on doing this, just getting to this now, but definitely an interesting speaker selection for BYU. I think there are some positives. I'm going to go over that. I'm probably going to make a few people mad from all sides of the political spectrum here in this episode, but very interesting to have the Reverend Dr. William Barber II as a speaker in a devotional. I think there's a couple questions that we need to ask ourselves. I am going to go through his speech and kind of review a few of those points, and then try and, how do we read this? How do we read this with BYU? How do you read this in the context of the church? And, well, we're going to go through that, and I'll summarize that at the end of the episode. What is a devotional at BYU? That might be one question we would have. I attended BYU. The campus completely shut down. I don't know if they still do that, but they shut down the entire campus because it was so important to get everybody to the devotionals. What is a devotional? I always thought that it was kind of this spiritual thing, right? It was a midweek spiritual injection that you were supposed to get from BYU. Now, that doesn't mean it always needs to be a Latter-day Saint who's speaking. I don't believe that at all. I love interfaith efforts, and I'm glad BYU does this. I think that students at BYU should have exposure to good role models that come from other faiths, especially if they are in positions of leadership. So I'm not sure what a devotional means anymore there. And there's definitely an effort from the department heads and maybe BYU administration, I don't know, to focus on race. And there always seems to be one solution to this. Now, this guest doesn't quite go to the extreme that many others that have been asked to speak at BYU have, or some of the books that have been referenced by some of the department heads for reading in their themes that they put forward for each semester. But he still falls under the umbrella of social justice, definitely. And he's highly political, right? So it's just interesting to me that you bring in someone at a devotional that is so unbelievably political. His whole background is political. 2016, he delivered a speech at the Democratic National Convention. A historian, Professor Timothy Tyson, named Barber the most important progressive political leader in the state of North Carolina in generations. He says that he built a statewide interracial fusion political coalition that has not been seriously attempted since 1900. So again, I mean, this is a strong political message. I just don't think that's a good idea to bring on as a guest of BYU. This is not even a department. This is not a guest in a class. This is BYU. So I can understand clubs and others inviting political messages and different ideas onto campus. I think that's a good thing. But when the university itself, I mean, that's what the devotion is, right? The devotional. When the university itself invites politically charged guests, that's very different. Now, the theme for the devotionals right now is becoming a beloved community. This comes from Martin Luther King. It actually comes from Royce during World War I, another religious leader and philosopher. But MLK adopts this, and becoming a beloved community now is an MLK-focused theme for the devotionals. So we're going to follow how this goes and who's invited and how this is going to work. Right? We had Martin Luther King III, I believe, spoke a little bit earlier. I think that's a great guest to bring in, but probably a little bit of political charge there. This follows right along with what the Kennedy Center did in their theme earlier this year on race and referring to Ibram Kendi and his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and all of the individuals that were invited to speak who are very far on the left. And so it seems that when you are in academia and you are going to talk about race because now everybody must talk about it all the time, that there is only one medium for that discussion, and that is hard left critical social justice with a very strong dose of critical race theory. Why is that? And why is BYU adopting that? Why is every speaker the same political person with the same political agenda or very similar? Where are those that have different ideas on race? Where are the Chloe Valderys and the Larry Elders? I mean, inviting someone like as charged as Candace Owens is, right? A young black woman on the right is no different whatsoever from inviting William Barber here, as far as politics go, or many of the other guests that have been invited to speak at BYU on race. It's all the same thing. There is no diversity of ideas. And this guest is just another in a long line of social justice preachers, if you will, even though they may not be clergy, that give a message that in the end, you're going to see at the end here what happens, is meant to rile everybody up and activate them in a political fashion. That's what it is. And I kind of like this guy. I kind of do like him. Like I've said with several other individuals, I'd love to sit down and have lunch with him and really talk about these things. I'm sure he's a good guy. He's got a great heart, it seems, but he's very political. And that's where we have to separate things. This is the clear thinking again of President Oaks. You have to separate these other political messages from any message that would be one of uniting and strengthening each other. And that's not going to happen with this guest. To him, they're one and the same thing. To social justice, it's one and the same thing. It's a hard left message. That is the chassis that carries the message of race forward. A little bit more about the Reverend Dr. William Barber II. He was with the NAACP for a long time. It'd be very interesting to know if there was some discussion between the church in their partnership with the NAACP that brought him to BYU. That seems very possible to me. Or there was someone from BYU who used the relationship with the church and the NAACP to get the Reverend Dr. William Barber II to come and speak at BYU. That would not be out of the question, right? I still support the church's partnership, though, with the NAACP. I want to be very clear about that. The way that they're doing this is the right way to approach this. The money does not go to the NAACP, right? The money goes for missions that the church focuses on: family history, welfare, education. So I just want to be clear on that. A little bit more about him. He is currently a visiting professor at Union Theological Seminary, which is maybe the leading progressive seminary in the United States. And he's written several books on, moving things forward for minorities, especially black minorities. And he's seen a lot kind of as the next Martin Luther King in some ways. And there is some truth to that. I'm going to give credit where credit is due. There is some truth to parts of his message, and that's where I want to make some distinctions here with him as compared to, let's say, like an Ibram Kendi, that much of BYU faculty seem to be enamored with. So let's go ahead and go to the video and try and parse some of this out and get an idea of where, because we're going to have to wade through this. We have to wade through these waters. And as these things continue to encroach further and further, and we have to be able to dissect this and separate the political from the positive. And so that's what I'm going to attempt to do here in commenting on this video here. So let's take a look at it.
I'm so humbled and honored to be here at Brigham Young University. To your president, to all of the students, the faculty, the staff.
Okay, I like the way he starts this. He starts from a position of humility. That's not a very common thing that you get with, especially coming to BYU. And so that's a nice thing to see. And there are some very positive sides to him in this speech that I like, and that's one of them.
Now, I come here today to share with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I come as a fellow faith traveler who takes seriously the Word of God and the deep moral values represented by various faith traditions, the commitments to love and truth and justice and care for one another as a matter of faith.
Okay, so this is the first thing to look at. It is, look, he's calling for morality. That is a very rare thing to get from many that are pushing social justice. You got to remember that. And you have to give kudos to him for this, because most people that are pushing social justice are not looking for morality. That's the first thing I like about him. I do believe he's a fellow traveler. I don't like his means to the end, but I do believe he's a fellow traveler in religion and spiritually. And morality is something that is so easily tossed aside with critical social justice. It's not really looking at that because it doesn't really look at the individual much. It looks at groups. It looks at collectives. It looks at data. And dismisses the individual and dismisses right and wrong oftentimes. Remember that a very strong infusion of postmodernism and relative truth are a big part of critical race theory and a big part of critical social justice. He's not really aligning himself with that. And that's an important distinction.
I'm both a conservative and a liberal.
Well, I appreciate the effort here. That is not really true. I do think he's trying to be inclusive. I think he knows what the audience here is, or maybe he doesn't. But I think I would prefer something more along the lines of I am neither a conservative nor a liberal, or I am neither on the left or I am neither on the right, to try and just kind of put an olive branch out there. But his whole history shows that he is on the left. Again, I don't want to put him in a box. I think that there are some very positive things about him as compared to many other individuals that I've studied quite a bit, such again as Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo and Kimberly Crenshaw, etc. Now, one thing I always like is when you have somebody from a different faith tradition that quotes from the Book of Mormon. That's always a positive. Again, I don't agree with his means on how he would want to accomplish this, but I love that he's going to read out of the Book of Mormon here.
Now, I'm also no great scholar of the Book of Mormon, but I studied comparative religions and I take your faith very seriously. I've listened close enough to your traditions to know that in addition to the scriptures I've shared, there are values in your holy text, like the one in Mosiah 4. Perhaps thou shalt say, the man has bought upon himself his misery. Therefore I will stay my hand, and will not give unto him my food, nor impart unto him my substance, that he may not suffer, for his punishments are just. But I say to you, says the Spirit, O man, whosoever doeth this, the same hath great cause to repent. And except he repent of that which he hath done, he perisheth forever, and hath no interest in the kingdom of God. For behold, are we not all beggars? Do we not all depend upon the same being, even God?
Okay, now, so that's always nice. It really is. Now, this is part of a message that I've given on critical social justice that many listeners here do not agree with me on, and I understand where you're coming from. But I'm glad he quoted Mosiah 4. Right? Perhaps you will say in your hearts that he has brought this upon himself. There is a problem, I believe, on the right of thinking that everything is just about merit. It's just about, I'm going to pull myself up from my bootstraps, which is ideal. It's an ideal. It's a good way to go. It's what I teach my kids. But to say that someone hasn't done that and therefore they deserve this, or, it's not that we need to be reminded all the time of, especially of race, and all of these things. I mean, quite frankly, the Latter-day Saints do an immense amount of service relatively to the rest of the world, right? I mean, we have service projects constantly. We do it with the youth. We do it with the adults. We give to humanitarian functions on our little donation slip. We've got missionary work, we've got tithing, and we've got humanitarian. We do produce a lot of funds and a lot of effort and labor for service for those that are less fortunate. And that's a wonderful thing. And that goes right along with Mosiah 4. But I agree with his point here, that we cannot just idly sit by, at least, and think that we live in just a purely libertarian world of individualism that does not require love and charity and a social bonding that the Savior would have us do. And in fact, the whole rise of critical race theory and critical social justice is because it fills a vacuum, quite frankly. It fills a vacuum where little effort has been given politically and socially to those that are less fortunate. Now, relatively, we do an amazing job in the United States, especially. A lot of people give a lot of money to different charities, and that's a wonderful thing. But I don't know that a Zion society would look like our society today. Do you think it does? Do you think we are at that level? And what would it take to bring those things together? Are we not all beggars? So there I probably teed off a few of you already with that message. Okay, and then I'm not going to go through all of the political things he says because I don't want to go into left versus right and Democrat versus Republican. That's not my thing. But he does go over everything from universal health care to wages, right? Minimum wage, to trickle-down economics, which is kind of the Reagan-Bush agenda that kind of started that with their more along the lines of a support business so that there are more jobs and et cetera. It wasn't, I listened to his speech for the DNC, watched his speech for the DNC convention. It's almost identical. It goes over most of the same things. So again, he doesn't sit there and try and go, rip against the Republicans, and he doesn't, boost up the Democrats. But it's the same speech. And again, it just goes along the lines that I was saying before, that this is all about politics. And this is the problem that I have. Even this, it seems like a good man, like I said. But the problem I have with religion entering in that way into politics is that you end up being absorbed into a larger agenda so many times that has little to do with what he is looking for, which is a moral revolution, right? He wants a march on Washington for morality. The problem is that's not the only thing he wants. Right? The title of his speech is "The Need for a Mass Coming Together in This Moment of Crisis." And he calls it a moral crisis. And so the issues of minimum wage and universal health care and all of these other things are the crisis to him. And fine, there is a crisis with these different things as far as not minimum wage necessarily, or even universal health care, or trickle-down economics, or however you're going to look at something Keynesian, or if you're looking at Milton Friedman on two different ends of the spectrum of economics. There are people that need help. But there's a larger moral crisis involved that has to do with sticking to a higher morality overall, individually, that he's not going to speak about. And so the conflation continues between one specific party for him and a leftist type of an agenda. That's his morality. The state must take care of everything. That's his morality. Now, I agree with the ends that he's looking for, the support that people need, but I don't agree with the means. And a lot of other people don't agree with those means. So why is it again that over and over again, with a theme here of becoming a beloved community, and the theme of the Kennedy Center earlier this year on race, why is it always the same agenda? Why is it always the same pathway without any diversity of ideas? I challenge the professors and the department heads and those in charge of the devotionals. Where are the other ideas? They're non-existent. Why do you have to be lockstep with the rest of the universities nationwide in a social justice religion, a social justice gospel? Because it's dangerous. And it's not so much that you even invite this man as a guest. I don't think that's a big deal. I know a lot of you people think that's that's not the problem. The problem is that everybody who is invited under these themes, under the idea of race, they're all the same politically. Why is that? Is that what the students deserve at Brigham Young University? One vision? Let's keep going through the speech.
We must have a mass poor people's low-wage workers assembly and moral march on Washington in this moment to put a face on these numbers, to call for a moral reset so that the rejected of every race, along with people of faith and people of deep moral concern and advocates, and even the wealthy with a conscience, can help save the heart and the soul of this nation and democracy, because anything less will put us in grave jeopardy. Because what we're doing now is morally indefensible, it's constitutionally inconsistent, and it's economically insane. If we were...
Okay, so I want to just say a couple things here. This is another place where William Barber here, he distinguishes himself from the hard leftists, like Ibram Kendi, Robin DiAngelo, Kimberly Crenshaw, Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanczyk, etc., Angela Davis. This is important to see, right? He wants to save the soul of America. And in his mind, the soul of America is not a Marxian utopia. At least I don't think so. That's not the way he talks. He brings up the Constitution many, many times in support of it. That's the exact opposite of the pundits of critical race theory. So that is a distinguisher here with him, and it's an important one, because that is along the lines of civil rights and not critical race theory. That is along the lines of a Martin Luther King and not of the radicals and leftists of the 60s and 70s. So again, credit where credit is due. That's an important thing. It's just, again, I don't agree with most of his means of accomplishing what he is looking to accomplish. He looks to the state too much in my mind. But again, where else would you look? If there is a vacuum of support for individuals, who's going to change things in the inner city? If you don't have the help that you need, obviously there's still problems there. Huge problems. Look at Chicago. Look at Detroit. So if there's still problems there, and yes, people have their agency, but again, you can't go to Mosiah 4. It's not just their own decision. What I don't like about what he says is he acts as if the state is the solution, instead of what the church has done with the NAACP, where they're going in and they're educating on their self-sufficiency program, on the church's self-sufficiency program. That's why this partnership is so great. It does come from the bottom up, not from the bottom up so that the people have power to the people. It's bottom up so that there is an education given to individuals in the inner city, where they can learn about everything from budgeting to bills to very basic things to give themselves a foot forward in their lives and in their families' lives. That's a big deal. And I can see that relationship and that issue really blossoming between the church and the inner cities. And think about how amazing that would be. Honestly, the lives that could be changed and the good that the church can do in those communities. How else are they going to get in there? I would ask you that. How else are they going to get in there? So that part is good, right? That's part of our clear thinking. That part is good. And that's not what he's bringing up here. He relies too much on saying, well, we need the state involved and we have to change policies and systems, a lot like critical race theory does focus on. That's what the NAACP focuses on politically. And he was the president of the NAACP in North Carolina for many years. Again, the church is not involved in supporting the politics of the NAACP. Please keep that clear. Now, is BYU in support of that? I'm sure many of the faculty are. But inviting him to speak is one thing. Inviting everybody that speaks, giving the same message or a similar message, that is a concern. And it makes you think, where is BYU right now with all of this? Because there's no way to separate, to divorce BYU from what has happened to the other campuses in the United States. You can't. They're being absorbed by the whole thing. And their religion, I hate to even say this, right? But they're the religion of critical social justice, the social justice gospel, is entering into BYU. And it is a direct conflict with the doctrine of Christ and with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Is this another step toward that? Yeah, it is. Again, I like this man. I want to put my arm around him. I want to talk about these things. I want to learn more about his background. But I don't agree with him. Okay, so then he's trying to get, his goal here is this moral march on Washington. I like the words, I like the name, but it's very politically charged. Here's what he says about that.
And now with nonviolence and love and truth, we are going to work to save the heart and the soul of this democracy, as well as call for the same around the world.
All right, so again, he talks about the heart and soul of this democracy. Those are not words, it's not a phrase you will ever hear from Ibram Kendi or anybody that really pushes critical race theory. Now, he's going to bring up here the preamble of the Constitution. Again, This is good.
Even our Constitution says that you must establish justice, not benevolence, justice. And then if you establish justice, you can ensure domestic tranquility. And if you want to hold on to domestic tranquility, you have to provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare. And then the 14th Amendment that saved the Constitution says you must make sure you have equal protection under the law. It's time, y'all. It's time to make ending poverty a top legislative priority. It's time for poor and low wealth people who make up 1/3 of the electorate to say somebody's been hurting our people far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
So I like that he goes to the preamble of the Constitution. I think that this is important. I love that he's using these documents. He at least believes in an American democracy. He believes in the founding of America. That is something that existed with Martin Luther King. Now, when he talks about justice, he probably has something a little different in mind than I do. When you frame it that way, all you really end up looking at, as he says, is that there are oppressors who are not just, that are oppressing the victims down below. And it's not that that doesn't happen. Most of it, I would say, is based off of negligence. Right? I think that most of that, you could say the justice there, the lack of justice there from those above to those below has more to do with negligence and a lack of charity and love for those people. But you can't just look at these things and say it's all because of an oppressor, right? That's the problem with going to a Marxian framework with this. It never works. You can see that there might be things that need to be changed. That's great. But if that's your whole framework, well, that we've tried that, right? It doesn't turn out very well. You have to also ask yourself the other side of the spectrum, the other side of the coin to this, which is why are people in poverty? And is there anything they can do to help themselves, or is there anything others can do to help them and give them a hand up? What can be done for them apart from, let's bring down the oppressors? So he and I would have a very different idea of justice. Now, another thing that I would say here is, interestingly, when I first watched this video, there was an introduction to this that was played up on the screen for the audience in the Marriott Center. And the introduction had a lot to do with the Reverend Dr. William Barber II and some of his work and what he's done in the past. Took out little excerpts of speeches, people that he's been with, singled out individuals who have had some really bad and tragic things happen to them. And then also in that introduction, he called for a coalition of everybody except for people that would be conservative, which is really odd, right? He part of his coalition was for progressive whites to be a part of this, and the poor, and many others. It's very politically charged. Now, it looks to me, because I've searched all of the videos that might come up on this, and this definitely is the same one that I saw. They've removed it. So whoever's in charge of the video being up on YouTube has gone in and spliced out the introduction video on this, which is probably smart of them to do. I just wish that I would have caught it before they cut it out. So here's where things get a little nuts, and I kind of wish I was there for this speech, because I would like to know who was in attendance, number one. And then you'll see here as he gets really riled up here at the end, like a Baptist preacher kind of in one of his sermons. You see the faculty here and those in attendance I think there was a couple thousand people here in attendance for this speech. They all are going to rise to their feet and give a standing ovation. And I think you'll see and hear from him. It's like he's expecting this. This is what he wants. This is what he's doing. And so as he's putting this together, again, his message is this moral march on Washington. And something he calls in his last book, the title of the last book is called A Third Reconstruction, that he wants in America. And maybe we do need a third Reconstruction. It's just not based on his terms, I hope. So it's kind of funny because this is not a Latter-day Saint type of an event, right? This is very different, and I think a number of people would have been a little bit uncomfortable, while others were probably really hooting and hollering along with him on this. Check this out. It gets a little nuts.
I got a suggestion. Let's get together. Let's put all our energy together. Let's have a moral march on Washington. Let's believe in the beloved community. Let's refuse to give up on this democracy. Do I feel a pulse in here? Is there any energy in here? Let's get together. I feel the power of the Holy Ghost.
Okay. I kind of enjoy that, honestly. I kind of enjoy it.
And I know that when we get together to do love and do justice, what a day. What a day. What a day. What a day. What a day of justice. What a day of reconstruction. What a day of revival. What a day of renewal. When we all get together. What a day. What a day. What a day.
Okay, so not very Latter-day Saint-ish. That's okay. But man, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall there and just be in attendance and see kind of a little bit more of the energy there and what was happening and who is kind of, do I stand, do I not stand? Because you get a complete standing ovation and applause for what he's saying here. But what are you supporting? And maybe if I was there, I think maybe politely, again, it just seems like it's expected from him as his crescendo of preaching just kind of rises all the way to the ceiling. And it's, it's a high ceiling there in the Marriott Center. And get up and politely clap for him. I don't know what I would have done. I don't know. And maybe a lot of people, that's the way they felt. So again, I mean, is this a step for BYU toward the social justice gospel? It is. It definitely is. And it'll be interesting to see who else is going to come in here. And I'm okay with a little bit of diversity of thought. Why isn't BYU okay with a little bit of a diversity of thought? Where are the other speakers, BYU? If you are especially having African American and other black speakers come in to talk about race and a community of belonging, where are those who have different ideas on how to accomplish this? Why is the university not bringing them in? They're all the same. They're all part of the social justice gospel. They're all part of the religion of academia. And I think that, I think there needs to be more voices from us asking BYU, where are the other voices? Why have we settled on a single message of leftism and a social justice gospel when it comes to race? This is a huge mistake. And you need to know, right? Because I would want to know. You need to know, again, if you have children or grandchildren that are attending BYU, this is the dose that they get of this over and over and over again. And there are no other speakers that are brought in that have a different message. If you've seen them, point them to me, because I've looked. I don't see them anywhere. BYU at this point has accepted that the message of race is the message of the social justice gospel.